Hello, I'm Sasha, and I'm a senior researcher here at 열광'이라는 publishing company. I'm British, and I've been living in Korea for the past 6 years, and today I'm going to talk to you about the best way you can learn English and how you can learn 10 to 20,000 words fast.
I think when it comes to communicate with other foreigners in here, I couldn't find any difference. I mean, couldn't find any difficulties. But especially if it's just like a casual talk. But sometimes when I hang out with my foreign friends, going somewhere, when you talk really deep topic like biology or those kind of things.
I've been working here since I was 20. I couldn't find any happiness in me.
Okay.
So I just pursued money. But the thing that I only liked was that I was able to travel a lot with this money I earned.
Did you hear those men talking? They're both native Korean speakers, and after following our method, they were able to converse like this in English for an hour. They're pretty good, right? This level of skill requires at least 6 months of study. Someone with a basic knowledge of English could achieve this level in around 6 months. However, for someone with no basic foundation of English, this will be difficult to achieve in just 6 months, so it's best to assume at least a year of study for absolute beginners. The first person you heard started off with a basic knowledge of English, whereas the second person barely had any English skill to begin with. So, for the first person, it only took him around 6 months to achieve this level, whereas the second took around a year. It's important to keep this in mind as a point of reference for your studies. This lecture is mainly aimed towards Korean and Japanese speakers studying English, but these principles can be applied to learning any language. I was able to learn Korean by following these principles. In our videos, dependent on the topic, I will be doing some in English and some in Korean, so I hope you check out our content and please enjoy the video. First, let's discuss how to build good listening and reading skills. Those two people you just heard had pretty good reading and listening skills. What do you think their secret is? It's having the ability to understand a sentence in the order it was written, reading it word by word from beginning to end as a native speaker would. Direct language comprehension as you are listening and reading. So what would you need in order to achieve direct language comprehension when reading and listening? We have 2 principles to help you achieve this. So let's take a look at our first principle. Principle 1. For every word you come across, only one meaning should come to mind. What I mean by that is, for any word you come across in a sentence, only a single meaning of that word should come to mind, not several meanings. Take a look at this example text. Everyone, please raise your glass. I would like to propose a toast. I am pleased to announce that we have successfully raised funds to build a daycare center. Thank you all for your generous donations. We have many women here who are working and raising children at the same time. The word raise is used a few times, right? Here, here, and here. But each time it is used, the meaning is different. To be able to directly comprehend the language as you are reading, from here to here to here, as soon as you see the first usage of raise, you should know exactly what the correct usage of that word is. Just one meaning of that word should come to mind in an instant. The main idea is to only have one meaning of that word come to mind, not having multiple meanings of that word come to mind and confuse you. But there is one big problem with the way words like these are taught in Korea. When learning how to read English in Korean schools, it's very common for students to be taught to use inference to aid translation with words of multiple meanings. But inferring the meaning from one word from a similar word is not comprehending what you're reading. Instead, it just creates unusual word associations in your mind. Let's go back to the example. As you all know, in the first sentence, the word raise means to lift something up. But in the next sentence here, it means to collect money. While the spelling is the same, the context of each usage is different. Although in Korea, students are taught to use inference to figure out the meanings of words like these. So when they come across the second usage of the word raise, meaning to collect money, but they don't know what it means, they use the first meaning of raise to infer the meaning of the second usage. Studying using this method is not normal reading or listening skills. To be able to directly comprehend the language, from the beginning, you should be studying each of these meanings of raise as separate words. Take a look at this next example. This is the Korean word tada. In the first sentence, it means burn. In the next one, it means ride. In this one, it means put. And in this one, it means get. In each sentence, the usage of tada is completely different. Koreans would know immediately which usage of tada is used each time, not using inference to figure out its meaning. Of course, everyone should be studying English so that only one meaning comes to mind for each word. In order to do this, you should be studying so that each word is assigned just one meaning in your mind. I mean, you would study these words as each just having a single meaning, right? So how would you study the word fine? Fine can mean something that is good, that you're feeling well, or something that is thin or delicate, or a penalty sum of money. In a situation like this, should you study it as one word with multiple meanings? Not a good idea. Think about it like this. 1 plus 1 is 2, right? But what if 1 plus 1 did not only equal 2, but also equaled 3, 4, and 5? If the same equation had multiple answers, how would you be able to solve it? You would get so confused trying to solve something so simple. The word fine is an example of polysemy, which basically means a word with many meanings. The current meanings of the word are all different, but they all stem from one origin. So in the dictionary, the various meanings are all grouped together under the first meaning of fine, since all these meanings originally came from one source. However, fine also means a penalty sum of money. This meaning is written separately under the heading of fine too, right? The origin of this meaning is different from the first group of definitions that are written under the heading of fine 1. Fine 1 and fine 2 are homonyms. They have the same pronunciation and the same spelling. The definitions of fine 1 and fine 2 are different, but their origins are also different too. So with words with multiple meanings, whether they have the same origin, if they are homonyms, or if the current definitions are all different, each definition is a different word. In other words, it's not about learning multiple meanings of the same word, it's about learning each meaning as if it were a separate word. Like the word apple has a singular meaning, fine too can be broken down into words with a singular meaning, like this. In sentences that use words like these, to get to the point where you're able to think of just one meaning per word, whether that word was spelled the same or not, it's better to start off learning each meaning as a separate word. Right from the start, you should be learning these words as separate words to be able to gain direct language comprehension skills so that when you speak, you don't waste time finding your words and they will just flow out naturally. Let's move on to the second principle of achieving direct language comprehension. Principle 2. Be able to anticipate the next word in a sentence. What I mean by this is, whatever word you come across in a sentence, you have to be able to quickly anticipate what that next word will be. You also have to be able to predict the sentence structure and how it will unfold. This is how to achieve direct language comprehension. Let's take a look at an example. That haunted house is really scary. Even if I mispronounced the word house as douse, you would still be able to understand the sentence, right? That's because everyone can anticipate what word would come after the word haunted. You are able to predict that the word is house since you already know the words that are usually used together with the word haunted are words like house, castle, and scary. Also, you can predict that the word after haunted is house since grammar-wise, a noun usually comes after an adjective. So thinking back to our example of fine, the meanings of fine are all different from each other, right? Each meaning has a different situation and environment in which it is used. Since each situation and environment is different, the words surrounding each usage of the word within the sentence will be different. Each usage of the word would have words paired with it that are different from each other. For example here, fine is used with view to mean that the view is good. And here, fine is used with how much, so this fine means to pay a penalty sum of money. Utilizing the surrounding words in a sentence like this can help you figure out exactly which meaning of the word fine is being used. So when you are studying a word, you should be studying the surrounding words, or simply the commonly associated words, together. This way, just one meaning of the word will come to mind instinctively, and you can predict what the next word is going to be. Now let's move on to how to develop good speaking and writing skills. Most Koreans will tell you that they are able to read English with little difficulty, but tend to have a lot of trouble with speaking. The reason they find this difficult is because when they learn English, they study grammar and vocabulary separately. They're basically taught just to plug words into a grammar formula. This is a deeply rooted problem in Korea's English education system. It doesn't use the correct principles for language learning. To solve this problem, we need a more innovative way of thinking. So let's take a look at the 2 principles you will need in order to have good speaking and writing skills. Principle 3. All the words you want to use should already be in mind. Principle 4. The grammar structures between words should already be in mind. What I mean by this is, before you speak, you should have already chosen the words that you want to use, having them readily available in your mind. Then you should be able to easily put those words into the correct grammatical order so that the person you are conversing with can easily understand what you're about to say. You get the idea, right? So to be able to apply these principles, what do you think you'll need to do? Well, when you're learning vocabulary, for each word you need to learn its grammatical information. In other words, the properties of the word and its usage have to be learned together. So let's take a look at an example sentence. I opened the window. This sentence consists of 3 parts: the subject I, the verb opened, and the object the window. Any native speaker who heard this phrase would easily be able to use this in conversation. You know this because you know all the words in the sentence and you know how the sentence is formed from its grammatical structure. So how do you know the grammatical structure this sentence uses? The answer is simply by not studying grammar and vocabulary separately. For instance, when you learn the word window, verbs like open and closed will be used together with it. Also, if you take a look at the word order in the sentences, the verbs in Korean and English are placed here, and in the Korean sentence, there is also an added postposition 을 here. So when you learn the word window, you are learning all of these little grammar points together with it. What if you were to study the word open? You do exactly the same thing. It's not just learning the definition of the word open, it's learning about how to use that word and the grammar all in one go. Okay, so now do you understand the principles of good reading, listening, speaking, and writing skills? Just understanding these principles won't be enough for you to actually apply English in the real world. In order to master English, you should be keeping the following points in mind. 1. Words with multiple meanings should be studied as separate words, each with a single meaning. 2. Words with multiple meanings should be studied in separate contexts apart from their other meanings. 3. Each word should be studied together with its grammatical usage. So in order to begin your studies, you will need materials specifically designed using these principles and key points. Especially for countries like Korea and Japan, where English usage is scarce, the proper materials are a necessity. It's difficult to get results from materials that don't have sound structure or methodology to back up the content. Okay, so in order to study and abide by these key points, let's look at the type of materials that we will need. You need to study so that each word only has one meaning. So you will need study materials that only use one meaning per word. You will also need voice recordings by a native speaker to study accurate pronunciation. Remember those 2 people you heard earlier at the beginning of the video? These are the materials they use to study English. It may just look like a vocabulary list at first glance, but this is an effective textbook with a reading, listening, and speaking focus all in one. Okay, so we want to study so that each word only has one meaning, right? Let's take a look at how this book does it. There are no words here with 2 or more meanings given. Another special feature of this book is, for words with multiple meanings, or homonyms, each meaning is separated so that you can study them as separate words. So if you were studying the word fine, it means good here. It means feeling well here. It means thin or delicate here. It means a penalty sum of money here. These materials are designed like this so that you can study each meaning separately, as they are placed in completely different parts of the book. See here on page 25, page 231, page 377, and page 453. They're all separated. Now you can't get the meanings mixed up, right? Finally, we need materials that show example sentences for each word. Of course, we need to practice good pronunciation and intonation, so we will need voice recordings by a native speaker. Using useful and practical examples of English, you can study the words within a sentence to gradually understand the grammar properties of each word. I will explain in more detail how to do this a little later on. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for, the study method. There are 3 steps to this method. Step 1. The objective of step 1 is to understand the basic elements of a sentence, the words. You need to understand what the words mean, how they sound, and how they are written. While the principles discussed earlier stated that it would be better to study both the words and the sentences at the same time, for someone with no basic understanding of English, this wouldn't be a practical approach, which is why you must first master the vocabulary. As a guideline, someone who already knows 5,000 to 10,000 words can skip step 1. As people who have already studied a lot of words can start at step 2, it only takes around 6 months following a proper study method to be able to live in an English-speaking country. Everyone knows you need to study a fair amount of vocabulary in order to be good at English. I mean, you would need to know a decent amount of vocabulary to get a good grade on a test anyway, right? How would you be able to understand anything in English without knowing any words? It's important to study at least 10,000 words. Okay, so it's time to begin step 1. You have the right materials to start, right? Is that all you'll be needing? Actually, in order to get the best results, you need to use a specifically designed study method. The method for step 1 is simple: to study all the words at once and then repeat in one big cycle. The key point is to study all the words at once. Let me explain using an example. Have you ever seen the 1,000 Chinese character memorization technique used in Korean schools? Korean students have to learn the meanings of many different Chinese characters, so Korean teachers have a unique way of teaching it. The teacher starts off by leading a chant. The sky is Chun, the ground is Ji, indigo is Hyun, brown is Hwang, and so on. Then the students repeat after the teacher while following along in their books. After everyone follows along from the first character Chun to the 1,000th character Ya, they repeat the chant again from the beginning. Studying like this allows everything they study to be repeated every day. You can learn English words like this too. While listening to the voice recordings of the native speaker's accurate pronunciation and following along in the textbook, you can cycle through all the words in the textbook repeatedly. Let me show you how it's done.
Stretch,
Stretch,
dumb,
dumb,
catch,
catch,
footprint,
footprint,
dogfight,
dogfight,
fart,
fart,
money,
money. After going through all the words in the book, from beginning to end, go back to the beginning and repeat the cycle. If you do this about 30 times, you will be able to learn all the words by heart as well as their meanings. Do you always just stick to learning one word at a time until you've completely memorized it? I'll show you what I mean. Usually people learn words like this. Stretch, 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 stretch. Dumb, dumb, dumb. This is an absolutely terrible way to study. Instead, just try going through everything you need to learn and repeat around 30 times. So why is it better to study all the words in one go? Let me explain using an example. Okay, it's the start of the new school year. The homeroom teacher calls attendance every day to learn the new students' names and faces. I mean, a teacher needs to know the students in her own class, right? These days, a class usually has around 30 students. The teacher should be able to memorize all the students if she calls the attendance every day, right? But that doesn't seem like a particularly large number of names to memorize. Let's make it a bit harder since we're talking about learning English words. Let's say the class had 1,000 students. Let's take a look at how the teacher could learn 1,000 names. Okay, now let's say that there are 1,000 students in one class, and the teacher memorizes all of them by calling the attendance over a period of 1 month. From student 1 to student 1,000, the teacher calls attendance once a day, every morning, comparing names and faces, trying to put names to faces. Okay, so that's what student 1, Minji, looks like. And that's what student 2, Sumin, looks like, huh? Student 3, Jungho, is pretty tall. This is how the teacher thinks while calling attendance, trying to remember the student's individual characteristics. Let's assume it takes 2 seconds to call one student's name. To call all the students' names each day over a period of 30 days would take 16 hours in total. So in just 16 hours, the teacher could memorize the names and faces of 1,000 students. Let's call this method A. It uses the same methodology as the 1,000 Chinese character memorization technique. Now let's compare how this would be done using the old methods Korean students used to use. Students would memorize one word at a time by repeating it numerous times before moving on to learning the next word. Let's call this method B. Let's look at applying method B to the teacher calling attendance scenario. This time, the teacher calls out each student's name 30 times in a row before moving on to the next. Starting from student 1, Minji, the teacher calls out, Minji, 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 30 times while committing her features to memory. The time used to call each student is exactly the same as method A. With method A, the teacher is calling out each student's name every day for 2 seconds over a period of 30 days. But the difference with method B is that the teacher is calling each student's name 30 times in one go. So if the teacher calls student 1 Minji's name 30 times, next the teacher will have to call student 2 Sumin's name out in exactly the same way. Sumin, Sumin, Sumin. After calling her name out 30 times, do the same for the next student and the next. 30 times each while memorizing their faces, all the way until the 1,000th student. Of course, the amount of time given is exactly the same as method A, 16 hours. So by the time you got to the 1,000th student, do you think the teacher would have memorized all of the students' names and faces? I highly doubt it. If you used method A, after 30 days you would be able to remember all 1,000 students. But by using method B, after the 1,000th student, if someone were to ask you a student's name, you wouldn't be able to recall it. For example, if you were asked to recall the 477th student's name, you wouldn't have a clue who it was. So why doesn't method B work? Your memory is split into two main parts, your long-term memory and your short-term memory. If the teacher wanted to remember all the students' names and faces after they graduated, this information would be stored in the long-term memory. The brain is constantly processing information stored in your short-term memory. The information stored in your short-term memory only remains there for around 15 to 30 seconds before the majority of it is forgotten. Only the real special and important information is moved into long-term memory so that it can be retained for a long period of time. In other words, long-term memory only stores important information. So, in order to be able to retain information for a long time, you will need to make your brain think that the information you want to remember is important, which is why method B is not an effective method. Constantly repeating Minji, Minji, Minji would not make your brain think that this is important information. From your brain's perspective, there isn't any difference between the first time you called Minji and the 30th time you repeated it. All this is just mindless, robotic repetition. So with method A, by calling each name only once today, and then tomorrow, and then the day after tomorrow, every day for a month, on the first day, your brain wouldn't think much of this new information, but consistently repeating it every day would cause your brain to think, hey, this information must be important. I better remember it. Basically, you're just helping transfer the information from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. So in order to retain information for a long period of time, the kind of information you need is not one instance of continuous repetition of the same information, but a variety of information that's repeated time and time again, leaving a few hours or a day between repetitions. Basically, it's not about repeating the same information, Minji, 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 but having some distinction between the information, Minji, Sumin, Chongho, to differentiate between the information. Also, creating a situation where information sticks out, for instance, Minji, Minji, Chongho, Minji, Minji, would make the information look special to your brain so that it's more effective in engraving it into your memory. This is the science behind how your brain remembers things. I would recommend researching it in more detail in your own time. It's quite useful to know. So, to sum up, using the repetition method, Minji, 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 as method B suggests, is the worst way to commit things into your long-term memory. Method A is far more effective in committing information into your long-term memory. Can you see the difference now? As I'm sure you all know, repetition is important, but it's absolutely not just mindless repetition. The basic concept of the repetition method needs to change. When conversing with English speakers, there are many Korean people that have trouble finding the words they want to use in English. This is because they haven't been studying the words effectively. You should study so that you can speak with confidence. For this purpose, you will need to use tailor-made materials as well as a specifically designed method. This is how you'll be able to commit the information into your long-term memory. Our Korean audience use this book to study English, right? I use it to study Korean. It's designed for teaching English in Korean, but I just use it the other way around. Whether you're learning English vocabulary or learning how to speak English, it doesn't matter which language you use. The methodology is still the same. It's a good textbook for anyone who wants to study Korean. Okay, so first of all, learn the first 10 to 20,000 words as quickly as you can. Take a look at this person's experience studying using our method. Someone in their 50s managed to memorize 15,000 words in 1 to 2 months. Age isn't an issue. The key is having the right materials and study method. Start by becoming a vocabulary master. This alone will change your world. And your test scores too. You probably won't see results with this method around the first 10 times you try. Instead, all the words begin to grow in your mind at once. Think about it like this. If you're planting seeds in a field, at first they won't grow much, but then things will begin to gather momentum and all of a sudden they will just shoot up, all at once. It's the same with learning words. The beginner phase is slow, but later you'll reap the benefits. Okay, so now let's move on to step 2. The objective of step 2, using the word you studied in step 1, is having just one meaning of each word come to mind and working towards anticipating the next words in a sentence. This will help you build a solid foundation for the ability to directly comprehend the language as well as speak instinctively. To complete step 2, it's not just about knowing what the words mean, it's about how to use that word and learning its grammatical usage. Step 2 is also simple. Just like step 1, listening to the native speaker voice recordings and studying all the sentences at once, and then repeat in one big cycle. Since you have mastered the words in step 1, you already know the meanings of all the words in the sentence, so what's left is showing you how to use that word, and all you have to do is figure out the grammar structure. Let me explain what I mean. Take a look at this sentence. Americans eat with knives and forks. 미국인들은 나이프와 포크로 식사를 합니다. Okay, so if we were studying a sentence like this in step 2, the word eat is frequently used together with words like knife and fork. When these words are used together in a sentence, you are learning that the verb eat appears first, and then after the words knives and forks come after. Basically, since you already learned the meaning of the words in step 1, in step 2, you already know the meaning of the words American, eat, with, knife, and fork. Now, it's not just about the meaning of each of the words, it's about learning the properties and the grammatical information of each word. So in step 2, whatever word you come across, you should be grasping the meaning of that word's meaning and characteristics within a sentence. It's not something that can be taught. Just like learning to ride a bike, playing piano, or learning to dance, English grammar is about learning from experience, studying how each word is used in a sentence so you'll be able to use it straight away when you come across it again later in a similar situation. This is how you can gain the ability to directly comprehend the language in practical conversational speaking. This is how I learned Korean. Going back to the book, you can use this same method over and over again with the following sentences. Listen to the native speaker voice recordings and study the English and Korean carefully to get a feel for the similarities and differences between the languages. Utilizing the repetition study method, listen to the audio and follow along with the English written sentences. All of the words you have learned in step 1 are used to make all of these sentences, so there won't be a word you don't know, which makes it easier to grasp the meaning of the sentence. So once you've completed step 2, you should be able to read, listen, and write without difficulty. Of course, speaking at your own pace is fine at this stage. What about studying for tests? Take a look at these people's experiences on our blog. Typically, the TOEIC exam and things like high school tests, SAT type exams, civil servants exams, the English they use is all the same. So if you study and complete step 2, you will be able to answer exam-style questions. Even without additional tuition, you could still be able to get great test results. Naturally, as you improve your English skills, your test results will improve too. Okay, finally, step 3. Even if you finish step 2, you will still be slightly lacking in conversational fluency. However long you are able to converse with a native speaker is the real test of English skill. There are some people out there who believe being able to use phrases such as, "How much is this?" or "Where is the subway station?" is being at a conversational level. That's fine for an elementary school English class, but nowhere near real conversational skill. Step 3 is a process aimed toward real English fluency. To become fluent in English, you need to actually converse with someone face to face. You already have the vocabulary to be able to do this from learning about 10,000 words from step 1. You gain a sense of sentence structure through step 2, but are lacking when it comes to conversing with people, so this is something that needs to be worked on. It's not just about memorizing sentences and phrases, because you need to be able to react and respond to the ever-changing information being exchanged through conversation. So, how do you improve your conversation skills? The answer is simple. You could have English conversations over the phone or find someone to speak with for an hour a day. If you wanted to do it quickly, you could study really intensively for hours a day, even if it was just for a month. You don't need any special tips or tricks. Just go and talk to someone. There is something you must be careful with, though. Those companies that set you up over the phone with a native English speaker to learn English. Don't trust a company that tells you that even with little to no English skill, you're able to learn through telephone conversations with a native English speaker. These companies are only interested in your money, not teaching you English. Even if you diligently study through step 1 and 2, when you start having telephone conversations over the phone, it will be a little bit difficult for you. What would someone with no experience in English be able to say? Nothing, really. Then the English speaker on the other end of the phone will just get frustrated and you'll just be left feeling embarrassed and ashamed. Also, there are people that start learning English through watching English movies and TV shows. To people without any basic knowledge of English, this is just pointless suffering. But if they wanted to be able to watch English movies and TV shows, they should first start by learning vocabulary. In other words, complete step 1 of our study method. At step 3, watching movies and TV shows is also good for your English study. But to begin the process of improving your fluency, inevitably you will need to meet someone and converse face to face. If you're already able to converse well, then you can just watch English movies and TV shows for fun. I bet everyone wants to know an even faster method, right? I understand how you feel, but there's something important I want to mention when learning a language. Whatever learning materials you choose, first you should definitely check whether that material has a real method to learning or not. The next issue is the time frame the material claims that you can get results within. Obviously, a book titled Become Fluent in English in 2 months will make you want to believe the hype and clutch at straws to make you believe that you can trust it. But if you only believe about 5% of what's being said, then it's wise not to go for it. Okay, for more information, check the description box below for links to our blog. We've been communicating with our learners through our blog for 7 years because we truly believe and trust in our methods and materials. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.